Think of the last time you were properly alone. A closed door, or a parked car, or a walk with your phone in your pocket. Nobody able to see your face. For almost all of the time humans have existed, that was very hard to arrange. One camp, one fire, 10 to 30 people close enough to hear you breathing. So where did you go to cry? To argue with your partner? To have sex? To grieve? To simply stop being watched? We don't fully know, but there are real clues. Start with the size of the world you lived in. Upper Paleolithic living floors, the trampled surfaces where people actually sat and worked, are small. Not villages, a cluster of hearths. At Pincevent in northern France, André Leroi-Gourhan mapped a Magdalenian camp around 13,000 years old. Around each hearth, the tools and bone fragments fell in a tight, readable halo. Those halos are the size of a small kitchen. A fire and a working space a couple of meters wide. Enough for a handful of people sitting with knees almost touching. You get the same picture from living camps. The anthropologist John Yellen mapped hoansi camps in Botswana in the 1960s and 70s, hut by hut, hearth by hearth. The huts sat in a rough ring, entrances facing the middle, often only a few meters apart. Everyone was inside one field of view. You could watch the whole community without turning your head. That's daylight. You might assume night solved the problem, the way it does for us. It didn't. Night was the most crowded part of the day. We expect one bed, one door, 8 unbroken hours. That expectation is unusual. It belongs to heated houses, spare rooms, and the last couple of centuries. Surveys of sleep across non-industrial societies, including work by Carol Worthman and Melissa Melby, describe something different. Shared space, shared mats and skins, a fire kept alive, people surfacing and talking through the night. Frank Marlowe's long work with the Hadza in Tanzania describes brush huts and families bedded down together. Sleep is lighter and more broken than ours. Someone is usually awake. Polly Wiesner recorded hoansi conversations by daylight and by firelight. Daytime talk was largely practical and often critical. At night, around 4/5 of it turned into stories. So the dark hours were the sociable ones. The fire was a lit room with no walls, and beyond its edge was the place nobody chose to be. Children slept against adults for warmth. No cot, no separate room, which means most people who ever lived fell asleep touching another human being nearly every night of their lives. That's the situation. Now the practical question. If you needed 20 minutes unwatched, you couldn't shut anything. You had to leave. And people did leave, constantly, because that's what the work required. Foraging is not something you do in a courtyard. It scatters a camp across kilometers every morning. Richard Lee's detailed time studies with the hoansi in the 1960s found women's gathering trips often lasted most of a day, covering several kilometers out and back. Men hunted alone or in pairs. A hunter tracking a wounded animal could be by himself from dawn until dark, sometimes overnight. That's genuine solitude, hours of it. Then the small errands, fetching water, cutting firewood, relieving yourself. In camps like these, the bush just behind the huts is where privacy lives. This is the best guess for the main mechanism, and it's an unglamorous one. Privacy was made out of distance and errands, rather than out of architecture. But notice what kind of solitude that is. It happens on the way to somewhere, with a task attached. It isn't 20 minutes of nothing, deliberately taken, which leaves the hardest things unaccounted for. Sex, weeping, fighting with someone you cannot avoid, sitting with a body. Those happen inside the camp, in front of everyone. Marjorie Shostak's book, Nisa, from 1981, is the closest thing we have to a first-person account. Nisa, a hoansi woman, talks about sex and affairs in plain, unembarrassed detail. What she describes is privacy made from timing and darkness. Couples wait until the camp is asleep, or walk out of it, or use the hours when everyone is away foraging. Grief goes the other way. In many small-scale societies, mourning is loud and collective. You don't take sadness into a room. You take it into the middle of everyone.
And anthropologists working in camps like these describe an etiquette that does the work our walls do.
You hear everything. You act as though you heard nothing. Conflict was handled out loud. Lee described hoansi disputes argued in the open, with everyone commenting, mocking, pressing. There was no version where you took it outside. And when it got bad enough, the camp split. Families walked to another group, sometimes for a season. That was the release valve. Not a door, a journey. Still, all of this is inference from living people and scattered floors. Is there any direct trace of one prehistoric person going off alone? Sort of. Footprints preserve moments rather than centuries. At the Willandra Lakes in New South Wales, hundreds of prints around 20,000 years old record people crossing wet clay together. The trackways there include adults and children, and one long striding set, often interpreted as a man running fast. Even the running man wasn't alone. Others crossed alongside him. In Basura Cave in northern Italy, a team led by Marco Romano published prints in 2019 from about 14,000 years ago. 5 people, 3 of them children, crawling deep into a chamber. Caves are the closest thing the Palaeolithic has to interior rooms, and this is what's usually written on their floors. Groups, children, somebody carrying the light. Occasionally, a single trail goes in and comes back. At Chevet, a child's prints have been reported alongside the tracks of a large canid, though the two may have been made years apart. The honest reading of all of it is that even in the least useful, darkest corners of the landscape, humans mostly went in company. Solitude was available. It just wasn't taken. And that may be the real answer to the question. Not that being alone was impossible. That being alone was the last thing you wanted. Start with the plain physical version. A lone human at night, in a landscape with lions, hyenas, and leopards, is a slow animal with poor night vision and no group to shout. By day, the risk is quieter. Break an ankle 3 kilometers from camp, and nobody brings you water. Solitude removes the only medical system that existed. Then the social version, which is worse. Lee's data showed hunting success is wildly unreliable. Meat sharing was the insurance. Being outside that network meant hungry weeks with no cover. So being alone didn't read as rest. It read as exposure. It was the condition of someone lost, punished, widowed, or ill. A state you'd want to end. John Cacioppo argued, in his 2008 book with William Patrick, that loneliness works like hunger or thirst. An unpleasant signal, tuned to push you back toward other people. That framing is influential rather than settled, and researchers still argue about how much of it holds up. But it fits the archaeology uncomfortably well, which makes our own craving strange. Wanting an empty room, on purpose, for pleasure, is historically a very recent thing to want. Doors, corridors, 1 bedroom per child, headphones. Almost none of that existed before industrial cities, and most of it is younger than your great-grandparents. So maybe what we call needing space isn't a need to be unaccompanied at all. It's relief from a particular kind of attention. Strangers, screens, judgment from people who don't know us. 40,000 years ago, you could have had your 20 minutes. You just had to walk out past the last hut, into the dark, away from everyone who could keep you alive. And almost nobody did. If you want more of this, sleep, grief, boredom, the ordinary texture of prehistory, there's plenty more here.